Hello and welcome to 15.5 Day 2, Solving Radical Equations. Alright, today we're going to continue solving radical equations. Yesterday, hopefully, you learned how to solve radical equations that have a number here. Today we're going to do ones that have two radicals, which actually is pretty easy. What you want to do is, I want to square both sides still, but currently if I tried to square this side, I'd be squaring some binomial, which means you have to do that multiply inside-outside stuff, and that's just too much work. So it's really easy if you just move one radical to the other side, preferably the one that's negative. So just move this guy to the side. So you're going to have square root x plus 4 equals square root 2x minus 1. Now when you square both sides, you literally lose those radicals completely. So I'm going to square. Don't forget that squaring and square rooting are inverse operations, kind of like cubing and cube rooting raised into the fourth power and the fourth root. They're all inverse operations. So literally they just go away. You're left with x plus 4 equals 2x minus 1. Now you just have a multi-step equation like you had the first or second week of school. So I'm just going to solve for x and do it however you want to. I like to always move my smaller x over. I'm just going to minus x minus x. I'm going to get 4 equals x minus 1. Then I'm going to move my number over to the other side. So 5 equals x. Okay, but you're going to have to do some checking because these guys, you just got to make sure they work. So you can check them by hand or check them in that calculator emulator. I'm just going to do it by hand. 5 is a pretty easy number. So 5 plus 4 is 9, square root of 9. So this is me checking it. Minus square root, 2 times 5 is 10. 10 minus 1 is 9. That's way too big of a thing there. And then you could actually stop here. Square root of 9 minus square root of 9 is 0. But square root of 9 is 3. Square root of 9 is 3. 3 minus 3 is 0. So this guy is the correct solution. So x does equal 5. All right, so this is the exact same sort of problem, except it has some radicals. And also this guy is a little bit weird over here. So what you're going to do is, it might be a little easier if you write this with radicals. So when you write this with radicals, you're going to write 2, and only the x is raised to the 1/2 power. So this is square root x. So only the x is on the inside there. Equals, this entire thing is being raised to that 1/2. So that entire thing is a square root, so 6x minus 1. All right, you've already isolated these guys. There's no way to get rid of that 2, and I definitely wouldn't divide by 2. So just leave him alone. But when you square, make sure you square that entire side. I'm going to square that entire side, and I'm going to square that entire side. Okay, when I square this side, I'm essentially multiplying 2 root x times 2 root x. So 2 times 2, or 2 squared, is 4. Root x times root x is root x squared, or again, squaring and square rooting are inverse operations. You just get an x. So you do square the outside stuff, the inside stuff just stays as is. Over here, again, square rooting and squaring are inverse operations, so you get 6x minus 1. Okay, let's check this guy out. I like to always move my smaller one, but in this case, there's only one number, so I'm going to move my 6x over. So I'm going to minus 6x minus 6x. I'm going to get negative 2x equals negative 1. Okay, I want to get x by itself, so I'm going to divide by negative 2, divide by negative 2. X equals negative and negative makes a positive 1/2. But please actually check these answers because, again, extraneous solutions do happen. So I'm just going to go ahead and check this guy. And if you want to check it in the calculator, I'll just use my regular calculator. It's the same steps on the actual calculator. So I'm going to clear my calculator using the emulator. I like to always store my number. So x is 1/2. So I'm going to say 1/2. And then so I've typed in 1/2. I'm going to type in the store key. So store and then x. So if you store this as your x value, then you can just straight up type it in. So now I'm going to say 2x raised to the 1/2. So the left side of this equation is that jazz. The right side is parentheses 6x minus 1 parentheses raised to the 1/2. Same exact decimal, so there's that guy. You could plug it in by hand and all that stuff, but it's just so much easier to just plug in the calculator. So that guy does work. I checked it. All right, we do have 2 word problems. We still have, 10 minutes. We have plenty of time. All right, a rectangle has a perimeter of 24 inches a length of 4 inches, and a width of square root of x plus 2 inches. Find the value of the width. All right, well, don't forget that to find the perimeter of a rectangle, that is 2 length plus 2 width. The perimeter is 24. The length is 4. So there's, 2 times 4. So the length is 2 times 4. And the width is square root x plus 2, which I guess I did not need those parentheses, but whatever. Okay, so there's my equation. Now I'm just going to go ahead and solve it. This is actually going back to yesterday's stuff, but I wanted to go ahead and do a word problem using yesterday's stuff. So I only have one radical. And again, I got a whole bunch of mess going on here. So I'm going to go ahead and clean this up a little bit. 2 times 4 is 8. And I'm not going to write the parentheses because that's redundant. All right, so if you have only one radical, again, I want to be able to square that guy. So get rid of everything else. Get rid of loosely attached first. So minus that 8 over. And then get rid of that firmly attached, so divide by 2. Divide by 2 on both sides, you get 8 equals square root x plus 2. Okay, now that you have only one radical, then you can go ahead and square both sides. Okay, squaring 8, you get 64. Squaring and square rooting are inverse operations. They cancel out, so you just get x plus 2. Okay, subtract 2 from both sides, you get 62 equals x. All right, and then probably the easiest way to check this is just to kind of do it mentally. So 62 is my x value. So 62 plus 2 is the square root of 64, which is 8. So 8 is the length of that width, so 8 inches. So that's what our actual answer is. So now let's make sure that actually gives us the right value. So if the width is 8 inches, so 8 plus 8 is 16, and the length is 4 inches, so 16 plus 4 is 20, plus 4 more is 24. Does that give us our perimeter 24? Yes, it does. So the 62 does work if you plug it back in, but we just kind of did the mental math with our answer, but you could plug this guy straight back into the original and solve it that way as well. But please make sure you're actually checking answers because, again, extraneous solutions can happen. All right, just 2 more examples. Another one, going back to today's stuff, another one where we have 2 radicals. And again, easily just move the one that has a subtraction symbol over to the other side. So you end up with square root 10x minus 3 equals square root 8x minus 11. Those guys are both isolated, so go ahead and square both sides. Again, square rooting and squaring are inverse operations, which is lovely because then you just have straight up 10x minus 3 equals 8x minus 11. Okay, solve for x. Subtract 8x from both sides, you're going to get 2x minus 3 equals negative 11. Add 3 to both sides, you're going to get 2x equals negative 8. Divide by 2 on both sides, you're going to get x equals negative 4. Okay, so that's my answer, but you have to check for extraneous solutions. I'm just going to plug this guy in. So I'll just do the math out loud here. So 10 times negative 4 is negative 40. Negative 40 minus 3 is negative 43. Okay, minus square root 8 times negative 4 is negative 32. Negative 32 minus 11 is negative 43 equals 0. All right, square root of negative 43 is nothing. That is an irrational, that's actually, I'm sorry, an imaginary number. So this guy does not exist and does not exist. So negative 4 actually does not work. So my answer is that there is no real solution. And that's because negative 4 is an extraneous solution. So your options for answers are you just say x equals a number, or you have no real solution because one of the answers is an extraneous solution. Okay? All right, and then last question here. We have a cone here. The formula for the slant height S, and you'll do this in geometry just next year. The formula for the slant height S, so that S there, of a cone is S equals that jazz. Sorry, where H is the height of the cone and R is the radius of the base. Find the height of the cone if you know the slant height is 4 inches and the radius is 2 inches. Okay, so just fill in the stuff you know, and then of course it has a radical expression in there, so we're going to go ahead and solve that. All right, so formula is S equals square root h squared plus r squared. That actually comes from the Pythagorean theorem. This is a right triangle, and that's a squared plus b squared equals c squared. When you solve it for one of those terms, you end up with a radical. So this is actually the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, s is 4. H is not known, so I'm going to leave that as h squared. And then r is 2. So 2 squared. Okay, 4 equals square root h squared plus 4. All right, so then here we have one radical, so we can just go ahead and square both sides. But you'll see how this is a little different than yesterday. Squaring both sides, you get 16 equals, again, square rooting and squaring, inverse operations, you get h squared plus 4. Okay, I want to isolate this h squared, so I'm going to minus 4 and get 12 equals h squared. Oh, but hey, that comes back to, I don't know, chapter 11 or 12. We have an h squared, so I want to solve for that. So I need to square root both sides. And don't forget, you actually get that absolute h, so you end up with the root of 12 equals absolute h. And that really means you do that positive negative route. So technically h equals positive negative root 12. But of course, we know that root 12 is reducible, so I'm going to go ahead and reduce that radical. So positive negative, and then 12 is 4 times 3. Square root of 4 is a 2. Square root of 3 is stuck. So h equals positive negative 2 root 3. If you were, and I don't have too much time left, if you were to actually plug both these values in, it's not going to work for the negative. And obviously, I can't have a negative height anyway, so you can just kind of use your own logic on this one. So I'm just going to take the positive answer. So 2 root 3, and then the unit is inches. Okay, so that height is 2 root 3 inches. So if you have a word problem, obviously just use your brain, and in reality, we can't have negative time or negative length. If you have two radicals, whether they're on the same side or on different sides, you're just going to square it. So get them on separate sides, square both sides, and solve. Make sure you always check for your answers. Don't forget yesterday's stuff. If you only have one radical, isolate that radical by removing plus and minus stuff first, multiply, divide stuff second, and then just square both sides. So pretty easy section, I think, not super difficult stuff. So go ahead and do your homework in Canvas.